You know, every now and then, Jada and I will invite people to church. Right here. Feels a little risky when we do it. Might feel a little risky to you all when you do it to invite people to your church. It sometimes can feel a little personal, maybe make you feel a little vulnerable. Come over to my church. But every now and then we do it. We invite folks to church, and sometimes it works. Sometimes people come. And sometimes when they do, we're surprised. And we think, oh my gosh, here they are. They've come, and it's nice, and it's great. And we visit afterwards, and we chat for a while. I'm almost certain that anyone who's ever been invited to church here and taken up on the invitation has felt warmly welcomed, something that Christian Temple tries to take pride in. And I can usually tell during the service if someone is kind of enjoying the feel of the worship service as I scan the crowd. But there's just one thing that I kind of wonder about after inviting someone to come to worship, and it's this. Once they come, I wonder, how do they feel about the Jesus stuff? How do they feel about the Jesus stuff? The way Jesus is mentioned in the service, or the way he's not mentioned. So many varieties. The way that we have language around the communion table about the body and the blood of Christ. How do folks who come in just fresh to this place feel about the Jesus stuff? And I guess one reason, after all, typically is because we don't talk a lot about the Jesus stuff in our conversations. It's kind of a personal thing. How did you like the service is a good fellowship hour question. How's the family? The job? How's your health? All good fellowship hour questions. We talk about that kind of stuff all the time. But one thing we don't often hear too much after worship in the gathering space is, tell me, how do you feel about Jesus? Or where are you with, let's say, the resurrection? Or tell me, after you grab a cookie and a cup of coffee, what difference does Jesus make in your life? We don't talk too much about the Jesus stuff, do we? We're followers of Jesus. We are Christians. We try to do that. But we keep our thoughts about all of that often to ourselves. I know I do, except for about 15 or 20 minutes on Sunday morning, as a rule. Which kind of makes me think that with however many people are in here, we may have just about that many answers to the question, this question, why specifically is Jesus important to you? Why does Jesus matter in your life? For some of us, Jesus is important in sort of a gateway way to eternal life. The idea that we believe in Jesus, and because of our belief in Jesus, we will find our way into life beyond this life. This is very important stuff. Maybe the most important thing for some of us. For others, it's that resurrection that's the most important thing about Jesus. Jesus' resurrection is an affirmation that there is life beyond the grave, and it softens the blows that life can offer to us. Life after death. Jesus shows us that way. Some of us I know, because you've told me, the most important thing about Jesus isn't all that stuff as much as the lessons that he taught while he was with us, while he was living. The stories, the sermons, the people he hung out with. For some of us, the most important thing about Jesus is to live our lives the way Jesus lived his life. What would Jesus do? Try to figure it out that way. And I imagine, in fact, I'm pretty sure there are people in this room for whom the most important thing about Jesus was his courage and his willingness to be prophetic, calling the powers and principalities of his life into question. If you were pressed, what would be that one thing that's most important to you about Jesus? I found this week, in looking at the text Kathy read to us from the book of Hebrews, one of my very favorite books in the New Testament, that they are grappling with the same question. What's most important about Jesus? The people who are reading this piece of ancient literature, beautiful literature, were having to figure something out. They were having to figure out what's most important about Jesus because the one thing that everyone had already believed about Jesus was turning out not to be true. That first generation of followers of Jesus, the disciples and St. Paul, everyone up to about 70 AD believed in Jesus because they believed he was going to return and establish the realm of God on earth. And that's why Jesus was important. But that hadn't happened yet. And people were beginning to think that not only had it not happened yet, but that it was probably not going to happen at all. People were giving up on Jesus as the Messiah. So, Hebrews and other books were written after this disappointment had been processed by the followers of Jesus to say this is why he's still important. And the reason the book of Hebrews says Jesus is still important resonates with why I think he's so important too. When it comes to the Jesus stuff, the reason I think Jesus is so important is because he is our high priest. And as our high priest, Jesus offers forgiveness. And because we have a reliable source of forgiveness, we are all given the opportunity, the blessed opportunity, the life-changing, life-saving opportunity to confess. It's my opinion that this is a game changer in life. This willingness to confess. The thing that opens new possibilities for us and makes of life something more than a zero-sum game is confession. The willingness to confess can change everything and bring new life. And the Jesus whose life was a picture of forgiveness gives us our best shot of discovering that life-giving potential of confession. Confession, forgiveness. I know it's not the way of the world, but it's the way of the gospel. I'm sorry, forgive me, I won't do it again, I'll try harder, I was guilty. That is not the way of the world. The way of the world is deny, deny, deny until people forget about what we've done. Whether it's an American president, a Saudi Arabian prince, a Hollywood producer, a fraternity brother after a rush week party, a police officer, a husband, a wife, a child. Deny, deny, deny is the way of the world. Confess and be forgiven is the way of the gospel. It's the way of Jesus. And it works miracles. It creates life where life has been lost. It restores relationships. It heals us. And it makes us whole. That's the part of the Jesus stuff expressed in the book of Hebrews when it says Jesus is the high priest that I'm most crazy about. Speaking of that kind of confession, I'd like to tell you a story. A story you can probably figure out how it's going to end, but I'd like to tell it anyway. It's a story about a friend of mine named Walter. People who knew him well called him Wally. I didn't know him quite that well, but I did hear a story or two from him. In fact, I read a couple of his books and heard him speak a few times. This was a story about Wally when he was 12. Wally's father was the provost of Concordia Junior College up in Alberta, Canada, Edmonton. This was in the 1950s. Wally's father was very important when Wally was only 12, he and his brothers. Wally and his brothers were the kids of the provost, which is probably kind of like being a preacher's kid. And as it turns out, at Concordia Junior College in Alberta, Canada, during the wintertime, you might not be surprised to learn that the game of choice is ice hockey. Which means that the hockey rink is very busy during the winter months, with games most every Friday night under the big lights, 6,000-watt lights. The whole town would come out to watch the team. This was in the winter. But in the summer, the hockey rink was abandoned, making it a great place, perfect place for 12-year-old boys to play football. It was almost perfect, in fact. The lines from the rink would melt into the grass so you could tell when you scored a touchdown. The dimensions were just right. You never had to chase the ball because there were boards all around. In fact, there was only one thing wrong with the field, and it was the stones. Lots of stones. The hard winter would drive the stones to the surface just underneath the ice. So when the ice melted, the stones remained. This was a problem, but not an insurmountable problem for 12-year-old boys. And so part of the ritual every summer for Wally and his friends, part of the rite of summer at the hockey rink at Concordia Junior College in Alberta, Canada, where Wally's father was the provost, was for the kids to walk all over the field that day, collecting stones and tossing them over the edge of the rink. All the kids did this and did a great favor to the grounds crew as they did it. All of them, that is, except for Wally, who was the oldest of all the kids, and as such, instead of just tossing them over the boards, Wally would wing them, one by one, up, 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 toward the lights that guarded the fields and lit the rink all winter long. Wally would throw those stones, and he would throw those stones confident, absolutely confident in the knowledge that he would never, ever hit one of those lights. Well, one day when the kids were all busy de-stoning the field, Wally's father, the provost of the college, walked to the rink in his impressive suit, right about the time Wally had wound up and made one of his best throws. Wally? What? Wally, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. Wally? What? What are you doing? I'm just throwing stones. Wally, you are throwing stones at 6,000-watt light bulbs of great expense. But Dad, I never hit them. I don't even get close. Wally, don't ever throw stones like that again. With that, his father turned on his heels and strode back to his office and away from the field, leaving Wally and his friends alone, and Wally still with a rock in his hand. He looked down at that rock, and he looked up at those 6,000-watt lights, and he thought, but I never hit them. And then, with what turned out to be the last stone of the season, with all the other kids busy choosing up sides, the game about to begin, Wally landed the perfect strike. He knew it when it left his hand. It was the perfect arc. Pop! Oh, the shower of glass came down. He heard his father's voice. Don't. Now, to be sure, Wally was scared, but he had a big plan. He was the big brother. He pointed his finger at the other boys and said, don't you ever tell Dad, ever, never, swear. And so they swore it. And that was to be the end of it. But instead, it was the beginning. It was the beginning. From that day on, Wally had shut out from his father a piece of himself, and in time that piece didn't go away, it began to grow. Wally began to suffer in his beloved father's presence. Everyone else in the family could relax with his father at the dinner table, talk so easily. How was your day? Wally had to be constantly careful of what he said. He was so envious, he was so afraid. He couldn't decide what was worse, the judgment he would receive by going ahead and telling the truth or the lie that he was living, and that was making of his wonderful father a dangerous daily threat. So one night when his father came to tuck him into bed, he called Wally by his pet name, Ah-Vee. It was what Wally called himself when he was too young to get the L out, and he called himself Ah-Vee. Good night, Ah-Vee, said his father with a gentle voice. Dad, don't say that. Wally said with a nod of his shirt. Why not? Just don't say that name. Ah, his father said, is my boy growing up? Too old for Ah-Vee. Then, as soon as his dad left the room, the tears finally came. Because you see, as long as he held his secret, Wally was no longer Ah-Vee. The next day, Wally ended the solitary confinement that always accompanies our secrets and our stories. He went to his father's office at the college, an impressive administration building with long halls that were as empty as a college building is on a Saturday morning. Footsteps echoed down the big hallway. Big dark oak door at the end of the hall with the words Provost painted on it. Come in. He peeked in. Ah, Wally, what brings you here? His father was sitting behind the desk. Well, you? But you know those 6,000 watt light bulbs that I showed you? Oh, yeah, his father said. Yeah, well, about those. I broke one. Ah, his father said. And did you climb up the pole and bump it accidentally? No. Tell me then, Wally, how did it happen? I threw a stone. Slowly, Wally's father stood and moved around the corner of the desk. Wally was prepared. He was determined he wasn't going to cry at the spanking or the lecture. But Wally did end up crying after all. He cried when his father knelt down and hugged him and whispered in his ear, "Welcome home, Ah-Vee. Welcome home." You see, the priest changes everything when the priest offers forgiveness. But the thing is, forgiveness can only be offered to those willing to confess.